Hey man, Shane here. Bulking is surprisingly controversial, but most of that drama comes from people who don't really understand what bulking really is. Almost always, when you hear someone say that bulking is dead or unnecessary or that it makes you fat or that it's unhealthy, they're talking about a specific substyle of bulking, usually dreamer bulking or dirty bulking, without realizing that every other way of bulking has completely solved all of those problems. So, in this video, I'll explain and rank the 9 different ways you can bulk, going over the best ways and the worst ways, the advantages and disadvantages, and what results you can expect. By the end of the video, you'll know how to solve all the common bulking pitfalls. That way, whichever way you decide to bulk, you'll be able to get much better results. The first thing to understand is that bulking is one of 5 different diet strategies that you can use to change your body composition. Weight loss is when you eat in a calorie deficit to lose weight without caring very much if some of the weight you're losing is muscle. This is how most overweight beginners naively approach fat loss. Cutting is similar to weight loss, but you're trying to burn pure fat while keeping all of your muscle mass. You can do that by lifting weights, eating a balanced diet, getting enough sleep, and not losing weight too quickly. This is how most overweight people should approach weight loss, but it's much harder and more complicated, so it's easy to understand why they don't. Body recomposition is when you try to burn fat and build muscle at the same time, usually without gaining or losing much weight. That means you don't really need to worry about manipulating your calories, making it the easiest but also the least powerful approach. Still, if you're overweight or skinny fat, this is often the best place to start. Bulking is when you lift weights to stimulate muscle growth and then eat in a calorie surplus to support that muscle growth. The idea is to gain muscle and strength as quickly and leanly as possible. It works incredibly well for people who are thin and lean. It also works well for people who are struggling to build muscle because the calorie surplus is an incredibly powerful performance enhancer, and it all but guarantees muscle growth. Weight gain is when you eat in a calorie surplus without doing anything to keep your gains lean. As a result, most people gain around 2/3 fat and 1/3 muscle. This is how most people accidentally become overweight, but you'll also find some skinny people who do it on purpose. Stephanie Buttermore is probably the most famous example of that. People who care about health and fitness usually focus on these middle 3 because they're the best at getting us bigger, leaner, stronger, fitter, and healthier. Here's where it starts to get a little controversial. I think that, by definition, bulking is the leanest way to gain weight. That's what it is. That's what it means. That's what separates bulking from regular weight gain. However, some styles of bulking are designed to give you much leaner muscle growth than others. And that isn't always a good thing. Sometimes that leanness comes at a price we aren't eager to pay. So let's delve a little deeper into it, starting with the most infamous style of bulking. A dreamer bulk is when you're over-optimistic about your bulk, dreaming of all the muscle you're building and blissfully ignoring all the fat you're gaining. The blame usually goes to eating too much food and gaining weight too quickly, but you can just as easily run into problems if you aren't stimulating enough muscle growth with your workout routine. When you challenge your muscles with a good workout, your muscles will try to grow bigger by gobbling up calories. So, the more muscle growth you can stimulate, the more calories they'll gobble up, allowing you to benefit from a larger calorie surplus. However, any calories that aren't gobbled up by your muscles can be stored as body fat. So, if your calorie surplus is too big, then you'll maximize your rate of muscle growth, but you'll also store a bunch of extra fat. That's what a dreamer bulk is, and it's especially common with early intermediates who have finished getting their newbie gains but haven't slowed down the rate of weight gain yet. Most natural lifters who are big and strong have gone through a period where they ate too much food, built a tremendous amount of muscle, but also got a little bit fat. Not fat enough to cause health problems, but fat enough that they didn't like it. That includes guys like me, Jeff Nippard, Alan Thrall, Jeffrey Verity Schofield, Alex Leonidas, Natural Hypertrophy, Sean Nalawani, Eric Helms, Greg Knuckles, Mark Ripto, and Mike Israetel, back when he was natural. Some of us regret dreamer bulking, but I'm hesitant to call it bad because underneath all the fat, we were building the foundations of our physiques. Plus, when you gain weight on purpose, it tends to be pretty easy to lose the fat afterwards. You probably won't even need to cut. However, there's still 2 things you should watch out for. First, if you gain weight too quickly, you can get stretch marks. Those stretch marks can last for years, and sometimes subtle traces of them can linger forever. Some people wear those tiger stripes with pride, but there are just as many people who don't like them. Second, if you get very fat, and if you decide to stay very fat, then it can harm your health in the long run. Most guys don't run into either of those issues. If you stop dreamer bulking before your waist circumference gets to 36 or maybe even 40 inches, then it's very unlikely to harm you in any way whatsoever. However, I still don't recommend it. There are much better ways to bulk. C tier. Bear mode bulking was created by Alex Leonidas and then popularized by Jeff Nippard. It's when you do a dreamer bulk on purpose. The idea is to gain weight quickly to maximize muscle growth and then welcome the extra fat onto your body. You want that extra fat because it will make you look bigger and more formidable, especially in clothes. The other half of going bear mode is growing out your beard and body hair. The extra hair adds more grit and texture to your body, which fights against the round softness of the fat you're gaining. My criticism of bear mode bulking is the same as my criticism of dreamer bulking. It's great for building muscle, and I don't think there's anything wrong with gaining a healthy amount of body fat, but I don't know why you do it on purpose, especially when there's so many other good ways to bulk. C tier. Phantom bulking is the dark illusion of bulking. It's when you think you're eating in a calorie surplus, but you aren't actually eating enough food, so you don't gain any weight, you don't build any muscle, and you don't get any stronger. Phantom bulking usually haunts naturally skinny guys, like me, because it's difficult for us to eat enough food to overcome our overeager metabolisms. I struggled with this for years, failing over and over again, and every time I was left feeling hopeless about my genetics. The solution is as simple as it is cruel. You need to weigh yourself every week, and whenever you don't gain weight, you need to eat a little bit more food. I recommend adding about 200 extra calories. Keep weighing yourself every week and adding more calories until you're gaining at a pace you're happy with. I know that's easier said than done. I'll make a video soon about how to eat more calories more easily. On the bright side, even though phantom bulking is emotionally heartbreaking, it's actually pretty healthy. We're lifting weights, eating a good diet, and living a healthy lifestyle. All of that's fantastic for us. But we could be getting all those benefits while also making great progress. D ranking. Dirty bulking is when you eat high-calorie junk food to make it easier to get into a calorie surplus. And the bigger the calorie surplus is, the better. That's why you'll also hear it called the seafood diet, where you eat all the food you can see. Most people think that dirty bulking will make them fat, and it can, but not always. I've seen plenty of guys make lean gains while dirty bulking. It depends on how much food you're able to eat, how bad your diet is, how much muscle growth you're stimulating in the gym, and how much room you have on your frame for muscle growth. Plus, most people gravitate towards dirty bulking because they have a hard time getting into a calorie surplus. Those sorts of people have a really easy time losing fat afterwards. The bigger problem with dirty bulking is that some of the health effects of eating a bad diet aren't easily reversible. And when you combine that bad diet with a steep calorie surplus, it can exacerbate those problems. For example, if you eat a diet that messes with your blood lipids, raises your blood pressure, and increases inflammation, you can slowly, gradually accumulate plaque in your blood vessels, increasing your risk of heart disease. This is called atherosclerosis. A few months of dirty bulking won't give you that much plaque, but any plaque you do gain can be difficult or impossible to get rid of, so it's better not to gain it in the first place. I've spoken with several cardiologists about this, including a friend of mine, and all of them have been in total agreement about the potential harms of dirty bulking, especially when you have bad genetics for heart disease, like I do. You can do whatever you want, obviously, but I personally wouldn't recommend messing around with dirty bulking, especially when all the other ways of bulking can be so incredibly good for your health. I give it an F rating. Clean bulking is the direct opposite of dirty bulking. It's when you bulk up on a nutritious whole food diet while zealously avoiding the convenience of processed food, the sweet taste of sugar, and the tantalizing aroma of deep fried grease. If your clean bulk is more progressive, you might also restrict anything that's white, like white sugar, white flour, white rice, and white potatoes, swapping them out for a more diverse array of colors. And that's not totally crazy. Different colors of fruits and vegetables contain different nutrients, so it's usually healthier to eat a wider variety of colors. Clean bulking is pretty universally despised in the scientific, evidence-based fitness community, and I think that's unfair, but they do make 3 good points. First, the word clean isn't a scientific term, and it doesn't have a clear meaning. For example, some people will avoid gluten or grains or carbs in general without realizing that those foods are incredibly nutritious for almost everyone, and they're great for building muscle. Second, some clean diets are so restrictive that they limit the variety of nutrients you're eating, potentially making your diet less nutritious than it was before. For example, if you cut out coffee because you mistakenly think it's unhealthy, then you've made your diet worse. Third, some nutritionists worry that dividing your foods into clean and dirty categories adds a layer of moral judgment to your diet, which can make you anxious about the foods you're eating. I'm sure that does happen to some people, but some foods are healthier than others, and I'm not sure if skirting around the bush helps the average person. So there are some real downsides to clean bulking, but if you have a decent idea of which foods are healthy and which ones aren't, and if you aren't the sort of person who gets anxious about your food choices, then clean bulking can be perfectly healthy and it can work great. You can eat a wide and varied diet made up of healthy foods, and you can eat balanced meals that are rich in protein, fiber, probiotics, and micronutrients. Personally, I like recommending a balanced bulking diet instead of a clean bulking diet. It's a bit more moderate and it doesn't come laden with as much baggage. But that's just me. Some people prefer having clear restrictions, and I don't have any problem with that. Clean bulking can work fantastically well. I give it a B rating. Flexible bulking, which is part of flexible dieting, also known as If It Fits Your Macros, IIFYM, is what's popular with the more scientific, evidence-based fitness people who like to track their calories. This is the approach you often hear about from guys like Alan Aragon, Jeremy Etier, Jeff Nippard, Dr. Mike Israetel, Dr. Lane Norton, Greg Nuckols, and Dr. Eric Helms. They recommend specific calorie and macronutrient targets, where you're supposed to eat very specific amounts of protein, carbs, fat, and sometimes fiber. Flexible dieting is often criticized for encouraging people to eat Pop-Tarts and ice cream. That isn't quite true, but these guys do often spend more time talking about food quantity than quality, and they often hype up the small amounts of junk food they eat. For example, Jeff Nippard's old podcast was called Ice Cream for PRs, so you can see how people might get the wrong impression. However, flexible dieting usually follows the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your calories are supposed to come from nutritious whole foods, and 20% can come from whatever you want. There's usually a cap on sugar and saturated fat, too, limiting each of those to no more than 10% of your total calories. As with clean bulking, if this approach resonates with you, then I think it's a perfectly good way to bulk. I still prefer the idea of eating a balanced bulking diet, but that's just me. I give it a B rating, putting it right alongside its bitter enemy. Lean bulking is when you try to build muscle as leanly as possible. To do that, you stimulate as much muscle growth as you can, eat a nutritious and balanced diet, and bulk with a very small calorie surplus. That way, there aren't many extra calories that can spill over into fat gain. The first problem is that lean bulking isn't a widely accepted term. You'll find plenty of fitness influencers who gain weight and yet refuse to call it lean bulking.
Contrary to a lot of other people, I've never bulked in my life. Yet, I was able to gain 20 pounds of muscle in my first 2 years of lifting. It was always my goal for me that I wanted to stay lean and aesthetic. And at the time I was running track and field, so I definitely wanted to keep my speed up, right, for that. So I just really never felt the need to bulk.
I don't control what the definition of lean bulking is, but I think if you're gaining weight slowly to build muscle leanly, then the simplest way to describe it is by calling it a lean bulk.
And again, what does main gaining mean? It means to keep your body fat the same while building muscle.
The same goes for Greg Doucette. If you're gaining weight while main gaining so that you can build muscle leanly, then I'd call that lean bulking. Most beginners assume that lean bulking or main gaining or whatever you want to call it is the best way to bulk up, but there are two major downsides to consider. First, the smaller your calorie surplus is, the less muscle you'll gain. Second, the smaller your calorie surplus is, the smaller your margin of error is. If you're trying to eat in a 200 calorie surplus, you could accidentally cancel that out by leaving a bit of oil in the pan, spending more time standing, or playing a game of tag with your kid. And if there's no calorie surplus that day, you won't build any muscle that day. That makes lean bulking incredibly finicky, and it means you'll probably need to track your calories. And even when you track your calories, there will be small fluctuations in your activity levels and body weight, meaning that it can take several weeks of lean bulking before you have good enough data to know if you need to adjust your calorie intake. On the plus side, you won't need to eat as many extra calories, making lean bulking easier on your appetite and gentler on your digestive system. Overall, it's great for guys who are afraid of gaining fat, who gain fat more easily, or who are already a little fat, especially if they enjoy meticulous calorie tracking. You might also like lean bulking if you're happy to make slower progress over a longer period of time. If you're thin or naturally lean, you're probably making things a little bit harder than you need to, but it's still a perfectly good way to bulk. A rating. Aggressive bulking is when you try to build muscle as fast as you possibly can. It's how I gained my first 50 pounds. You do it by fully optimizing your workout routine for muscle growth, giving every set your absolute best effort, eating a nutritious and balanced bulking diet, and then eating in an aggressive calorie surplus, often gaining a pound or more per week. Aggressive bulking works best when your frame has tons of room for muscle growth. That means it works best for guys who are still relatively thin. As you get more advanced, your muscles won't be able to keep up with all the extra calories, and you'll start gaining a disproportionate amount of fat. If you notice that happening, you should slow it down. Otherwise, your aggressive bulk can become a dreamer bulk. So, an important part of aggressive bulking is diligently tracking your results. You don't need to track your calories, but you do need to have some idea of how much muscle and fat you're gaining. And sometimes, because you see yourself so often, it can be hard to judge for yourself. That's why I recommend taking progress photos and keeping track of your measurements, especially your waist measurement. The other problem with aggressive bulking is that it's pretty hard to eat enough calories to get into an aggressive calorie surplus, especially if you're eating a nutritious bulking diet. That means it isn't always great for skinny guys with small stomachs, fast metabolisms, or weak digestive systems. I want to give aggressive bulking an S rating because of how much it transformed my life, but if I try to look at it more objectively, it's really only ideal under certain circumstances, so I think it deserves an A rating. The last way to bulk is the classic bulk, which averages out the benefits of all these different methods. The goal is to build muscle as quickly as possible while still keeping your gains relatively lean. It's how most people prefer to bulk. A classic bulk is halfway between a lean bulk and an aggressive bulk, which means you'll probably be gaining about 0.5 to 1 pound per week. That gives you a really healthy margin of error. If you undereat a little bit, you'll build muscle more leanly. If you overeat, you'll gain a little bit more muscle. Either way, you get great results. That makes classic bulking perfect for people who don't want to track their calories. It also helps to eat a balanced and nutritious diet. That diet can be clean, flexible, or more traditional, where every meal has a good source of protein, carbs, healthy fats, fiber, and a variety of micronutrients. Lots of fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, seeds, olive oil, seafood, some meat, some cheese, and yogurt. Maybe throw some high-calorie smoothies, trail mix, and homemade protein bars in there. It gets an S rating. Now that you know the different ways to bulk, you can defend it against its many, many enemies. If you see somebody trying to build it out of straw, you can build it out of steel. If someone says that bulking will only make you fat, they're talking about dreamer bulking, but you don't need to bulk that way. If you notice you're gaining fat, then start following a better workout program and stop gaining weight so quickly. If Greg Doucette says you should gain, then he might be talking about lean bulking, but he could also be trying to lure you into a phantom bulk, which doesn't work very well, especially if you're thin, lean, or already in the habit of lifting weights. If Mike Israetel makes a video called Bulking is Dead, he's talking specifically about aggressive bulking, and he's still wrong. Aggressive bulking works incredibly well for most skinny people. If someone says that clean bulking is unscientific and overly restrictive, that's true, but it can also be a simple and healthy way to eat, and it saves you from needing to track your macros. If someone says that flexible dieting encourages people to eat processed junk food, that's also true, but it's only encouraging you to eat a little bit of processed junk food. Your diet can still be balanced overall. If someone argues that lean bulking, or whatever they decide to call it, is the best way to bulk, it can be, but it usually isn't. Most people prefer classic bulking. It's the style of bulking that's designed to give you the best of both worlds, giving you relatively lean gains at a good pace without needing to micromanage your calorie intake. Alright, that's it for now. If you have any comments, drop them below. I hope to see you in the next one.